Hello, and welcome to week 14 of English 111. This week, we're going to focus on actually drafting your research paper. You have several different readings. Obviously, please read this lecture and listen to it. I'll be discussing drafting your research paper and going over how to document your sources in APA style. You should read Integrating Sources, which is found in a Pocket Style Manual, and Documenting Sources in APA Style, which is also found in a Pocket Style Manual. You have two assignments this week. The first one is a discussion forum where you're going to be asked to cite something like a cereal box, and more details can be found in the discussion forum. And you'll also be turning in a draft of your research paper, which is due on Sunday, December 16th at 11:59 p.m. So, when you begin drafting, it's a really good idea to begin by drafting your body paragraphs. You've already got an outline that you've put together last week, and you can begin with this. You want to try and translate your bulleted list of topics into full sentences. And you don't want to be afraid to change the order of your ideas as you're going through the drafting process. You may think, well, I worked so hard in putting this in order, maybe I don't want to change it. But the whole idea about writing a research paper and taking so much time and going through so many steps is so that by the time you get to the final version of your research paper, it's excellent. And you've done everything you can to understand all the different ways that you could present that information and come up and decided on the best possible way in your final draft. So when you're thinking about drafting your body paragraphs, you want to think about focusing on a central idea in each of your body paragraphs. Each of the body paragraphs should have a topic sentence in which you make an assertion, or you offer an observation, or you just ask a question. Your paragraphs should each follow some sort of a pattern, some pattern to get to the end point, which will be a final sentence that will draw a conclusion based on the evidence that you've provided in this paragraph. You want to support the point or the points that you're making in your paragraph by using evidence from your sources. Whenever you use evidence from a source, you want to introduce that source by naming the author, establishing his or her authority on the topic, and using attributions such as these are words like according to, claimed, expressed, reported, acknowledged, commented, inquired, said, stated, wrote, pointed out, etc. Things like that. Okay? And you always contextualize your quotation before and after you put the quotation into your paper. So what does this look like? Here's a sample. You can see on the left-hand side we have a sample body paragraph from the research paper, and the central idea of the paragraph follows an initial question. So the question is, given the potential costs, injustice, and national security, why hire contractors at all? And the main point of the paragraph is, ironically, perhaps the most often cited reason for using private contractors is that using these corporations saves the taxpayer money, since the government can hire them on an as-needed basis and does not have to pay for contractors' training, health care, or pensions. The third and fourth sentences use evidence from a source to show the real cost of hiring contractors. So to show, to prove what this paragraph is aiming to prove. The author of the evidence is introduced, and her authority as a source is confirmed by mentioning that she's a professor at Middlebury College. And then the quote is contextualized both before and after the quotation. Then the final sentence, therefore, the Department of Defense would actually save taxpayers money by reversing the trend of privatization. The final sentence draws a conclusion that supports the essay's thesis statement. Between your body paragraphs, you want to make sure you transition. Transitions are words and phrases such as however, and on the other hand, that show the relationship between paragraphs and sentences. Transitions help readers understand how one sentence builds on another and how a new paragraph is related to the one before it. By signaling these relationships, they help readers anticipate how the information and ideas they are about to read are related to the information and ideas that they've just read. So here's some ideas on transitions between paragraphs and ideas. And I give some ideas of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve by using these transitions. Try using these in your paper. You will be required to use these. And one of the things that you'll be looking at as you revise your draft is if you're using them correctly. So, when you draft your introduction, after you've really got some good body paragraphs, you want to properly introduce them. And the introductory paragraph, of course, goes first in your essay. But you don't always begin by drafting it first, because you want to understand what you're going to be introducing by looking at your introductory, by creating your body paragraphs. But you can try it either way. You can start by writing your introduction and then moving to your body paragraphs, or you can start by writing your body paragraphs and then insert your introduction before those body paragraphs. But much of the work, the good news is much of the work for your introduction you've already done when you created your topic history. An introduction should introduce your topic, it should frame your argument, and it should clearly state your thesis. Remember, your argument is the position you're taking on this issue. So when you frame your argument, you talk about the history of this issue, what other people are thinking about this issue, and what you think, and what you're going to be arguing in your paper. And I have a sample introduction listed here for you to review. Finally, your conclusion. And at a minimum, this should be the last thing you develop in your paper. It's also the last paragraph or paragraphs in your paper. At a minimum, your conclusion should summarize the main points that you've made in your paper and how these points support or prove your thesis. But remember that your conclusion is your last chance to leave an impression on your reader, and therefore it gives you a final opportunity to influence them. So it's really where you want to take your paper to a higher level. You don't want to just end by saying, I said this, this, and this, thank you, goodbye, right? It doesn't leave you with a very powerful impression when you read a paper like that. You want to leave a paper inspired. You want to leave understanding why the paper was written. What was the point? Why did you compare these things? Why did you look at this? And what have you achieved? And how does it relate to the greater world? Okay? Try to think on a broader scale when you come to the end of your conclusion. Clearly state how you've proved your point, what you've done in your paper, but then take it farther and really try to contextualize it or relate it to a larger issue. Don't worry, we'll be talking more about conclusions in next week's lecture as well. All right, finally, I want to talk briefly about documenting your sources in APA style. As you know, we're using APA in this class. APA uses an author date form of in-text citation to acknowledge the use of another writer's words, facts, or ideas. When you refer to a source, you want to insert parenthetical notes that give the author's last name and the year of the publication separated by a comma. The examples below. For a quotation, the citation in parentheses also includes the page numbers on which the quotation can be found if the source has page numbers. Sometimes sources will not have page numbers. So an example is here, but beginning on page 101, you have examples in our grammar book, a pocket style manual. You have examples on page 101 through page 106, where all the different ways that you can do in-text citations are cited. There's also information on how to create your bibliography as well. But we'll be talking in more detail about that next week. So hopefully this information will help get you started on citing your sources in APA style. But of course, if you ever have questions, please feel free to reach out directly to me. So this week, you're going to be turning in your first draft of your paper Even though it's a first draft, it should be very well crafted, okay? Next week, we're going to be working on revision and doing peer reviews. So you are going to be paired up with some of your peers, and you're going to be doing the work of reading their papers and helping them revise. And that will be our last week of class. But not our last week together, because week 16 will begin on January 6th after the winter break, and our final will be due on January 13th. That will be the official last day of our class. So that's it for this week. Please, as always, come talk to me if you have any questions. I look forward to seeing you guys online.